Russia's western border is engulfed in flames. The first shots have been fired, marking an unprecedented turning point. Poland, no longer merely NATO's defensive line, has now become the spearhead of the attack, aimed directly at the heart of Moscow. 40,000 Polish troops, under a general mobilization order, are advancing on Belarus and Kaliningrad. Behind them stands the full, formidable might of NATO, ready for war. British Eurofighter jets, French Rafales, and Dutch Patriot missile defense systems have appeared simultaneously in the skies. At the same time, the Ukrainian army has launched fierce offensives in Donbass and Kharkiv, turning the battlefield into a fiery hell. Russia is under attack from two fronts, its western border and the Ukrainian front line. Could this be the beginning of the complete collapse of the Russian Empire? And why? Can only the United States, under the decisive leadership of Donald Trump, hold the NATO alliance together at this historic juncture? Welcome to Military 247. Now let's get back to the main events. For a long time, the Poland-Belarus border was considered the most tense region in Europe. But never in modern history has it erupted with such intensity. At dawn, Poland's HIMARS multiple launch rocket systems and Krab self-propelled howitzers simultaneously opened fire, plunging Russian and Belarusian forward bases into a sea of fire. In the sky, warmate loitering munitions dove down like deadly arrows, shredding the first line of defense. This was not just a show of force, it was a formal declaration of war. Poland has decided it will not back down. They understand that if they don't stop Russia at the border, their future could be swallowed by a similar tragedy. Meanwhile, the Polish Air Force deployed its F-16 and MiG-29 fighter jets, but behind them was the undeniable and powerful support of the United States. Military experts confirm that the command, control, satellite communications, and combat software Poland is using have all been directly upgraded by the U.S. This is clear evidence that America's advanced military technology has permeated every aspect of NATO's operations, creating a formidable combined force. In contrast, Russia and Belarus were caught completely by surprise. They were preoccupied with the Zapad 2025 military exercise, which simulated scenarios of nuclear war and an attack on the Suwalki Gap. But from a simulated war game, they stepped directly into the brutal reality of war. The massive ammunition depots that Russia had stockpiled in Grodno, Brest, and the Kaliningrad region were hit in the very first barrage. Numerous battlefield videos show Russian T-72 and T-90 tanks completely incinerated, their turrets blown clean off, with Russian soldiers fleeing in absolute chaos. Where does the difference between the two sides lie? The answer is in the lightning-fast, precise operational coordination of NATO and Poland, supported by a real-time data link system provided by the U.S. Every movement of Russian troops is closely monitored, while the Russian side still relies on outdated paper maps, obsolete radio systems, and slow communications, leaving them completely reactive. Poland and its allies can destroy targets with pinpoint accuracy, down to the square meter. But that's only half the picture. To the east, Ukraine sees the opportunity. As Russia was drawn into the war on its western border, Ukrainian mechanized brigades unleashed a powerful preemptive strike. They used Bayraktar reconnaissance drones to guide American-supplied M777 howitzers and HIMARS rocket systems. As a result, many of Russia's field command posts in Donbass were flattened. A series of ammunition depots were blown sky-high. Within just 24 hours, more than 15 strategic bridges over the Siversky Donets River were destroyed, cutting off supply lines for tens of thousands of Russian soldiers. The question arises, how long can Russia hold out when facing NATO on its western border and a 1,000-kilometer front line with Ukraine? European military experts assert this is the first time since the Cold War that Russia has found itself truly encircled. These are no longer economic sanctions or diplomatic warnings, but real firepower, real missiles, blood and steel on the battlefield. Polish media even published images of JSSM missiles launched from F-16s targeting Russian fuel depots in Kaliningrad. If this is true, the war has already crossed a red line that Moscow had warned against. What's noteworthy is Russia's lack of a proportional response. Why, Bob? Because the Russian economy is sinking deep into crisis. The ruble has plummeted to a record low, the banking system is unstable, and the defense budget has been severely eroded. While Poland has the backing of the U.S. and NATO, Russia can only rely on Belarus, a weak ally. No new generation weapons have been brought to the battlefield, only obsolete Soviet-era machines. Su-27s, T-72s, S-300s, all of them outmatched by modern American military technology. This disparity is turning Russia into the weaker party, facing the risk of collapse. In Washington, Donald Trump gave a special address. He stated clearly that the U.S. will not let its allies fall and will show the world who is really leading this game. That statement wasn't just empty political rhetoric. It became a concrete order to act. It was thanks to Donald Trump's strong push that weapons aid packages for Poland and Ukraine were approved faster than ever before. He was the one who demanded the Pentagon expand its stockpiles of HIMARS, Javelins, and Patriots for immediate deployment to the front lines. And because of that, Poland was able to launch a decisive strike just hours after Russia violated its airspace. Ask yourself, without American support, would Poland have dared to open fire? Without Donald Trump's push, could NATO have acted in unison within days? The answer is clear to everyone. The United States, and only the United States, could activate such a rapid and effective response network. As black smoke blankets the western border, Russian generals still haven't found an effective counterplan. The Kremlin claims everything is under control, but the reality on the battlefield completely refutes that. Russia is being squeezed from outside its borders and from within its own weakening economy. Many analysts compare the current situation to the late 1980s, when the Soviet Union was mired in Afghanistan and the domestic crisis was worsening. Is the collapse scenario repeating itself? What we are witnessing in this opening act is not just a single battle, but the beginning of an entirely new phase, where Poland, NATO, and Ukraine are joining forces to push Russia back. And with unlimited support from the United States and the strategic vision of Donald Trump, the first shots on the Russian border are no longer just a defensive reaction. They may well be the death knell for an empire that is shaking to its very core. What do you think? Can Russia recover from this double blow? Or is it heading straight down the path of destruction, like the Soviet Union of the past? The first shots from the Poland were just the beginning. What is truly unfolding now is the factor turning Russia's western border into a giant pincer, tightening its grip with every pulse, leaving Moscow gasping for air. After the first night, Poland immediately coordinated with its NATO allies to launch an all-out campaign, no longer limited to a few artillery strikes or suicide drones. This is a level of coordination rarely seen in NATO's history. Just look at the military map. The Suwałki Gap, a narrow strip of land connecting Poland with the Baltic states, situated between Belarus and Kaliningrad, has long been considered NATO's Achilles heel. But this time, instead of being a weak point, Suwałki has become a death trap. Polish armored divisions are closing in from the south. The Lithuanian and Latvian armies are tightening the noose from the north. NATO dominates the entire sky with Eurofighters, Typhoons, and Rafales. Kaliningrad, Russia's most important military outpost in Europe, has suddenly become a completely besieged island. At the same time, Ukraine accelerated its offensive. Its mechanized brigades, equipped with modern American-supplied weapons, began striking directly at Russia's railway lines and logistics hubs in the east. Convoys of trucks carrying ammunition from Belgorod to Donbas were destroyed by HIMARS in minutes. A fuel depot in Luhansk burned fiercely, sending a colossal column of black smoke hundreds of meters into the sky. In Kharkiv, a U.S.-supplied suicide drone slammed into a Russian command post, reducing the entire complex to rubble. With Poland attacking from the west and Ukraine punching through from the east, the only remaining question is, how will Russia defend itself? The Kremlin continues to issue statements that everything is under control, but military analysts say this is just political rhetoric. The reality on the battlefield exposes Russia's dangerous level of confusion and disarray. Remember, NATO isn't just offering empty words of support. Within 72 hours, the U.S. deployed 2 additional F-35 squadrons to Poland. Along with them came Aegis combat command systems and reconnaissance satellites, turning the skies of Eastern Europe into a comprehensive mirror. No Russian activity can escape America's sight. Donald Trump, in an emergency address from the White House, affirmed that the U.S. not only stands with its allies but leads them, ensuring that no one has to bow to Moscow's aggression. This statement has become an unspoken command for all of NATO. Poland's strategy is clearly designed: strike fast, win fast, and sever every link in Russia's logistical chain. First is the HIMARS rocket system, a weapon that has already changed the face of the war in Ukraine. Now deployed right next to Kaliningrad, HIMARS can strike deep into Russian bases. Second is the American-supplied Patriot air defense system. Thanks to the Patriot, the Russian Air Force is almost completely denied access to Poland. Many Iskander and Kalibr missiles are intercepted just outside its airspace. Third is electronic warfare capability. The U.S. has transferred GPS jamming technology, paralyzing Russia's drones and cruise missiles. With these three solid layers of defense, Poland is not only capable of defending itself, but also has the strength to attack. Meanwhile, Ukraine is employing a precision strike strategy. They are not engaging in direct frontal assaults, but are targeting critical weak points: ammunition depots, bridges, and command posts. When a bridge collapses, an entire Russian brigade on the other side is isolated. When a fuel depot is incinerated, hundreds of tanks become useless blocks of iron. When a command post is destroyed, Russian soldiers are thrown into a state of complete communication breakdown. In just 1 week, Ukraine claims to have destroyed at least 40 Russian ammunition depots and logistics centers. This figure, if true, is an unprecedented blow since the conflict began. So what role is NATO playing in this picture? Clearly, it's not just a bystander. France sent a squadron of Rafales, the UK dispatched Eurofighter Typhoons, the Netherlands deployed Patriot systems, and the US is the backbone. Not a single Polish or Ukrainian attack could succeed without guidance from US satellites, without its command systems, and without logistics from Washington. Donald Trump emphasized that the U.S. will not let its allies fight in the dark. Every missile, every bullet will be guided precisely to its target. These words are not just for morale, they reflect reality. Russia is facing the most powerful NATO since the Cold War, and the man at the helm is Donald Trump. On the ground, the consequences for Russia are becoming increasingly clear. Kaliningrad, once considered an impregnable fortress, has now become a besieged pressure cooker. Supply lines from Belarus are blockaded. Every military convoy attempting to advance from the east is stopped by drones or artillery. Russian soldiers in the region are constantly sending distress signals. Many videos circulating online show Russian soldiers complaining about food shortages, depleted ammunition, and severely declining morale. This is unprecedented. Meanwhile, the Polish people are witnessing a completely opposite scene. They see a sky full of NATO aircraft, hear the sound of Patriot missiles intercepting threats, and know that this time they are not alone. This has ignited a powerful sense of confidence. Many Poles are volunteering for the front lines, supporting logistics, transporting food, and even signing up for the reserve forces. A small nation, with the backing of the U.S. and NATO, is becoming the spearhead against Russia. The critical question, can Russia counterattack? The answer, at least for now, is that it would be extremely difficult. The Russian Air Force has lost air superiority due to U.S. Patriot and F-35 systems. Russia's ballistic missiles are being intercepted repeatedly. The Russian Navy in the Baltic Sea is also under tight NATO surveillance. Even deploying reinforcements has become perilous, as railways and logistics depots are constantly targeted by Ukraine. Russia could threaten to use nuclear weapons. But would they dare, knowing that the U.S. has deployed Trident II missile submarines right off the coast of Northern Europe? Experts call this a stranglehold war. One side relentlessly tightens the noose, while the other is increasingly suffocated and losing its ability to maneuver. The tighter the grip, the more Russia's fragility and weakness are exposed. Many Russian generals are beginning to openly express their dissatisfaction, a sign that rifts are widening within the Russian military. Donald Trump understands this is a strategic opportunity. If NATO fully exploits it, they could force Russia to retreat not only from Ukraine, but from its entire western flank. He constantly stresses to his generals, don't give Russia time to breathe, maintain the pressure, and end this war in months, not years. That is why NATO has acted with such speed and unison. As night falls, the Russia-Poland border burns with thousands of artillery shells. From the east, Ukraine continues to push its offensive into Kharkiv and Luhansk. The roar of explosions from both directions creates a deadly symphony encircling Moscow. Europeans call it the two-front storm. NATO generals believe this could be the turning point that sends Russia into a spiral of collapse. And we, as observers, must ask ourselves, How long can Russia withstand this iron ring? Will NATO stop at the border, or will it push deeper to wipe out Moscow's entire western defense line? The answer is slowly becoming clear on the battlefield. The sounds of gunfire from Poland and Ukraine, echoing beyond the border, are not only creating military shockwaves but are also striking directly at Russia's fragile state apparatus. The economy, which had long been unstable, saw the ruble, a symbol of Russia's financial strength, continue its free fall. In just a few weeks, the exchange rate surpassed 100 rubles to the euro, and the dollar also soared, causing food and fuel prices to skyrocket. Russians lined up in long queues in front of supermarkets, trying to buy essential goods before prices rose further. The scene was reminiscent of the late 1980s, when the Soviet Union began to disintegrate in a spiral of economic crisis and loss of faith. In Moscow, the Kremlin continued to issue statements that everything was stable. A spokesperson insisted that the macroeconomic situation remained predictable and secure. But behind those words lay the naked truth. Russia is in a technical recession with 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth, and the risk of a banking crisis is becoming more apparent. A series of large enterprises have been forced to close. Many banks are experiencing massive capital flight. The ruble has depreciated, but the government cannot intervene effectively because foreign currency reserves have been depleted by waves of sanctions. An economy heavily dependent on oil and gas exports is now subject to a Western price cap, severely shrinking Russia's defense budget. Meanwhile, the explosions from the battlefield reverberated like daggers plunging deep into the social psyche. In St. Petersburg, thousands of families received death notices from the Kaliningrad and Donbass fronts. Russian flag-draped coffins appeared with increasing frequency in cemeteries. Each funeral was not just a personal loss, but also a major crack in social trust. People began to question why their sons had to die, while the leadership insisted everything was fine. This discontent spread wider and wider. Small protests erupted. Initially with just a few dozen people, they quickly grew to hundreds, then thousands. What is particularly dangerous is that even the elite within the Russian military began to show signs of division. Some generals argued that concentrating forces in Kaliningrad was a strategic mistake. Others admitted the army no longer had the logistics to sustain multiple fronts simultaneously. Some even openly expressed their dissatisfaction in closed-door meetings. These rifts are reminiscent of the tragedy when the Soviet Union's internal structure fractured, ultimately leading to its collapse. Meanwhile, NATO relentlessly tightened its grip. Precision strikes by Poland and Ukraine continuously destroyed Russia's ammunition depots and logistics centers. Every time a depot went up in flames, prices in Russia ticked up another notch, because military and civilian supply chains are closely intertwined. Every time a railway bridge was destroyed, factory production was disrupted, leading to goods shortages. The ripple effect from the battlefield to the economy was something Moscow could not control. In this context, the Russian people began trying to withdraw their savings, buy gold, purchase foreign currency, or move their assets abroad. In just 1 month, over $30 billion withdrawn from the Russian banking system. According to reports from international organizations, an already weak economy was being further depleted. Experts warn that if this situation persists, Russia could face a banking storm, where a series of financial institutions collapse simultaneously. Russian society descended further into chaos. Images spread on social media showed people jostling to buy bread, cooking oil, and gasoline. These scenes were a world away from the Kremlin's assertions of stability. Protests in Moscow, Yekaterinburg, and Novosibirsk erupted more fiercely. Riot police were deployed, but in many cases they also seemed hesitant, as many of them had families suffering from the same hardships. The loyalty of the security forces, the last wall protecting the regime, began to be questioned. So what has pushed Russia into this desperate situation? The answer lies in the technological and strategic superiority of NATO, with the U.S. at its core. Every precision HIMARS strike, every JSSM missile launched from an F-35, every successful Patriot interception proves one fact. The United States possesses and controls the most advanced weapon systems in the world. Donald Trump, through his tough and decisive policies, has transformed that technological advantage into real power on the battlefield. It was he who pushed for high-speed aid to Ukraine. It was he who ensured NATO was ready to deploy forces to Poland in just a few days. And it was he who affirmed that Russia would not be allowed to break the West with war ever again. Ask the question, without support from the U.S., would NATO have had the confidence to tighten the noose so quickly? Without Donald Trump, would multi-billion-dollar military aid packages have been approved in just weeks? And without the superior weapon systems from America, could Poland and Ukraine have turned the Russian border into a sea of fire? The answer seems all too clear. As Russian society fell into chaos, the impact spread to the military. News from the front lines continuously reported cases of desertion. Many units were abandoned as commanding officers fled. Equipment was left behind, and many tanks and armored vehicles were captured intact by NATO. Some reports even indicate that Russian soldiers have actively made contact to surrender because they no longer want to be cannon fodder in a meaningless war, a war that has robbed them of their reason to live. Meanwhile, a shadow of instability looms over Russia's major cities. Businesses are closing en masse, pushing the unemployment rate to alarming levels. Students and young Russians have taken to the streets to protest, their chants of no war echoing everywhere. Many can't help but draw parallels to the collapse of the Soviet Union 3 decades ago, a once mighty empire that disintegrated from within due to a combination of battlefield failures, economic crisis, and a severe loss of public trust. The most terrifying thing for the Kremlin is not NATO's missiles, but the loss of faith of the Russian people, the solid foundation they have always relied on. When that trust vanishes, all political declarations become empty, meaningless words. And when society begins to tremble so violently, the collapse can come faster than anyone predicts, more suddenly than anyone can imagine. In this context, Donald Trump continues to play a pivotal role. He not only supplies weapons to Ukraine and its allies, but also sends powerful messages, affirming to the entire world, America will not back down. The United States will demonstrate that the power of advanced technology combined with a spirit of unity can defeat any aggressive empire. That message resonates everywhere, not only empowering Poland and Ukraine, but also spurring other allies, from Germany and Finland to Sweden, to increase their aid quickly and decisively. NATO has become a rarely seen unified bloc, a solid front built on the strong leadership of the United States aimed at Russia. Many analysts predict that if Russia's economic situation continues to worsen, if social unrest continues to escalate, and if the battlefield continues to report humiliating defeats, the cracks within the Kremlin will erupt into a full-blown political crisis. It's a scenario many are calling the ghost of the Soviet Union returns, a terrifying repeat of the past. And the question being asked not only by the Russian people, but by the whole world, is how much longer can Russia hold on? A month, a year, or just a few more weeks? Are we witnessing the collapse of a great power right before our eyes? And if that happens, how will the world order change? The western border has erupted into conflict, and the homeland is in chaos. Russia is sinking deeper and deeper into a spiral of disintegration. These are no longer distant warnings, but a reality laid bare on every inch of land, every city street, every line of protesters. The images of Russian soldiers fleeing Kaliningrad, of Muscovites queuing in long lines at banks, and of flag-draped coffins in endless processions, all blend into a bleak picture, a harsh reality. Russia is in a nosedive. On the battlefield, NATO's encirclement tightens by the day. Kaliningrad, once Russia's impregnable fortress in Europe, has now become a completely isolated island. All supply routes from Belarus have been cut off. The S-400 air defense system, once the pride of Russia, has now become an easy target for drones and high-precision missiles. Many Iskander launchers were destroyed before they could even fire. The garrison there is running out of ammunition and food, and the morale of the soldiers has plummeted to its lowest point since the war began. To the east, Ukraine hasn't stopped. Ukrainian mechanized brigades are advancing rapidly into Donbas, repeatedly breaking through defensive lines that Russia had spent years building. HIMARS, the American-supplied multiple launch rocket system, continues to prove its destructive power. With just one salvo, an entire logistics hub with thousands of tons of Russian ammunition was leveled, creating a massive column of smoke that covered the sky. The Russian Air Force tried to respond with Su-35s and Su-34s, but they were stopped by Ukraine's Patriot and Iris-T defense systems. The balance has been permanently lost, and as the battlefield situation deteriorates, Russia's interior has fallen into total chaos. Protests in Moscow, St. Petersburg, and many other cities have spread, growing larger in scale. The Russian people are no longer just protesting the war. They are beginning to call for regime change. We don't want to live in a new Soviet Union. This slogan has been chanted at numerous marches. Riot police have been deployed in large numbers, but in many cases they just stand and watch. Some units have even refused to suppress the protesters because their own families are suffering the same hardships. The rift among the Kremlin's elite is becoming increasingly apparent. Many high-ranking generals are openly disagreeing. Some propose withdrawing from Kaliningrad to preserve their forces. Others argue for the use of tactical nuclear weapons to deter NATO. The internal power struggle has become intense, and this division is rapidly weakening Russia. Without a unified command, without a clear strategy, Russia is eroding its own strength. Meanwhile, the West is more united than ever. Under U.S. leadership, NATO continues to expand its emergency aid packages. Germany is sending more Leopard 2 tanks. Finland and Sweden are deploying submarines in the Baltic Sea. The UK and France are reinforcing their fighter jet squadrons. Donald Trump once again emphasized the message. This is not just Poland's or Ukraine's war. This is a war to defend global freedom, and the U.S. will lead until no one dares to challenge the world order. That statement ignited the morale of the entire NATO alliance. It is often said that a great power collapses not because of defeat on the battlefield, but because it loses the trust of its people. This is happening again in Russia. The people's discontent, the rifts in the military, and the divisions among the leadership have combined into a fierce storm, sweeping everything away. Many international observers compare Russia's current situation to that of the Soviet Union just months before its collapse. Is Russia walking down that same path? The scenario of disintegration is no longer a distant hypothesis. Some border regions have started to show secessionist sentiments. The republics of Dagestan, Chechnya, and many other autonomous regions are seeing protests demanding self-rule. If the central government loses control, this wave could spread, creating a political earthquake beyond all predictions. Meanwhile, Poland and Ukraine are not stopping at tactical offensives. They are exploiting every opportunity to break Russia piece by piece. Poland has intensified its shelling of Kaliningrad, completely cutting off electronic communications. Ukraine has launched suicide drones deep into Belgorod, turning industrial centers into seas of fire. At the same time, NATO has expanded its military exercises in the Baltic Sea, closing in on the port of Murmansk. Russia is being attacked from the outside and disintegrating from the inside. A major question is raised. Could Russia use nuclear weapons as its final card? Many experts believe that probability is lower than ever because the U.S. has deployed Trident II nuclear submarines in northern Europe, and the Aegis defense system is ready to intercept. Any reckless action by Russia could cost them immediate annihilation. Donald Trump has stressed that the U.S. will not allow anyone to use nuclear weapons to threaten the world. If Russia takes that risk, they will suffer the consequences instantly. That message is both a warning and a firm assertion of America's power. The world is watching Moscow's every move. Every day, international news brings new signs of Russia's disintegration. A bank goes bankrupt, a general defects, a city rises up. These small pieces are gradually forming a larger picture. Russia is no longer the Russia of yesterday. An empire that seemed invincible is now being eroded from its very roots. Western military experts believe that if NATO maintains its current pressure, in just 6 more months, Moscow could be forced to the negotiating table in its weakest position since the Cold War. This is the moment that Donald Trump and the U.S. have long prepared for. A chessboard where the U.S. wins not only militarily, but also economically and politically. And as we look at the whole picture, we must ask ourselves, are we witnessing a repeat of history? The Soviet Union collapsed in chaos in 1991, and now Russia is sliding into a similar vortex. This time, the strong push from the U.S. and Donald Trump could make the process happen faster, more decisively. A new era may be dawning, one where Russia is no longer a threat, and NATO, under the leadership of the United States, affirms its indispensable position. The only remaining question is whether Russia will collapse in a matter of months or weeks. And after this storm ends, how will the world map change? The answer will soon reveal itself in the very waves that are rising daily in the South China Sea. Thank you for watching our analysis of the war's developments. If you are passionate about geopolitics, military power, and what's really happening behind the scenes on the global battlefield, then Military 247 is the place for you. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel.